Militarily Speaking, episode 23, Pat Tillman Foundation.
This episode, we talk with Dan Futrell, CEO.
Welcome to Militarily Speaking, brought to you by Armed Forces Bank. This is Tom McLean and my heavily caffeinated co-host, right? Jodi
Yes,
Vickery.
Is there any other way to live?
Nope.
I didn't think so. Again, welcome to our show. We're excited to have you listening and learning about the Pat Tillman Foundation. I want to introduce Dan Futrell, CEO, and tell you a bit about him. Dan joined the Pat Tillman Foundation as CEO in 2019, bringing over 15 years of cross-sector experience to the team. Early in life, Dan benefited from the selfless service of others as his path took him in and out of foster care, ultimately landing in California due to the diligence of a volunteer social worker in Florida. This experience helped shape his commitment to service in his life. Raised by a single dad thereafter, Dan went on to graduate from Gonzaga University on an ROTC scholarship with a degree in business. Over the next 5 years, Dan would serve 27 months in Baghdad, Iraq, and Fort Lewis, Washington as a Ranger Qualified Infantry Officer. His leadership positions include platoon leader and company commander in a Stryker brigade before he served as an aide-de-camp in a deployed Corps headquarters in Iraq. For his service, Dan was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Ranger Tab, and 2 Bronze Star medals. Thank you for your service.
Yep, thank you.
And
there's more, right?
There's more.
Yes.
His introduction is much more impressive than mine ever would be.
We love his introduction.
Yes. In 2011, Dan was selected in the 3rd class of Tillman Scholars as he completed a master's in public policy from Harvard University. In Somerville, Massachusetts, a Boston metro city of 80,000, he served for 6 years as an elected official on the school board in a 5,000-student urban school district, focusing on social and emotional education and financial management of the district's $70 million budget. He has held operational leadership roles at nonprofits, Year Up, and the Housing Partnership Network, in addition to product and business development roles in technology startups prior to moving to Chicago with his family in 2019. And I know before we got on here, Tom, you've already covered Chicago sports and Boston sports. And yes. So welcome. We're very glad to have you here. Tom and I couldn't be more excited for you to be able to share with our audience about the foundation. And I think just for those that might not be familiar, I mean, it's hard to imagine people wouldn't be familiar generally with the story. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about Pat Tillman, who he was, and why the foundation was started?
Sure. Well, first, Tom, Jodi, thank you so much for having me here. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you sharing our story with your listeners and your audience. You know, Pat was somebody who was really driven by selfless service. He was somebody who, I never got a chance to meet him myself, but my working in this organization and being a Tillman Scholar, I've had the chance to meet many others who have met him, and they all describe him as somebody who was very intellectually curious and somebody who, when you were having a conversation with him, he was focused on you. He wasn't, thinking about the next thing. He was really listening and wanting to understand. But, he was somebody who pushed himself to excellence. He played for the Arizona State University for their football team, the Sun Devils, in the mid-90s. And he was generally regarded, even before college, as, having a lot of heart, but not maybe having the size or the speed to make it at the next level. And he was committed to playing football in college. And so, he didn't get a lot of offers to go somewhere and play. And ASU brought him on and he joined the team. And not only did he excel in his on-the-field performance, people have described him hitting you like being hit by a Mack truck, but he also was a leader on the team. He led in the locker room, he led on the field, and became somewhat of the heart of the team that he was on. And at the end of college, he said, he really wanted to play in the NFL. And again, too small, not fast enough, doesn't have what it takes to be in the NFL, and gets drafted as a 226th pick in the draft in the 7th round. Again, somebody who, you don't expect a lot from those guys. And, again, he played for the Arizona Cardinals. And not only did he become a starter, did he earn a starting spot, not only did he lead on and off the field, but he set records for, the number of tackles in a season. And so, after 9/11, he was inspired by and drawn to service and was asking himself, what do I do? Here's a major trauma for our country. Now is the time to serve. And, there's a video clip of him that the Cardinals did the day after 9/11. and they were just getting some of their players talking about what had just happened. And he reflected, he said, some members of his family had served in the military at different points in their lives. And he said, I haven't done a damn thing. Just playing football. And, he shortly thereafter joined the U.S. Army Rangers, knowing that, he'd be turning down a $3 million contract to earn $35,000 a year. He enlisted. He and his brother Kevin enlisted as Army Rangers. And he deployed first to Iraq and then to Afghanistan, during which he lost his life in a tragic fratricide incident. And, his wife, Marie, and his brother-in-law, Alex, and childhood friend, Ben, and, his brother, Kevin, and another friend named Jared started this foundation called the Pat Tillman Foundation in 2004, literally the month that he was killed, April 2004. And, we could get more into the foundation and what we do. But, the last thing I'll say about Pat is, having never met him, I feel like, he feels very present in our organization as an employee of the Pat Tillman Foundation, as a leader here, as a Tillman Scholar. He feels very present in our community as a reference point for a life well lived. And, we're careful not to idolize him. He was imperfect. He was human. Probably not everybody liked him when he was alive, and that doesn't matter. He was somebody who made some pretty exceptional choices that even 20 years later, nobody's leaving the NFL to join the military. Nobody's elevating service in the way that he did and with that kind of sacrifice. So even 20 years later, he's still motivating to a lot of folks, to include all of us Tillman Scholars.
It's wonderful. It's an incredible legacy that his family, I know, can't help but be proud of. Could you share a little bit about how that has transitioned into the foundation and the sort of things that the foundation has picked up as pillars of what are important and the kinds of things that you do for the community?
Sure. The foundation initially was born of a country's grieving an exceptional human. And a lot of people felt motivated to write a check and send it to the Cardinals or to ASU or to the Tillman family. And early on, they had almost $1 million all at once.
Wow.
And they had to have a conversation, say, well, man, we got to do something really good with this. People are leaning in here to show their support in a meaningful way. And so they created an endowment and a scholarship program at Arizona State University, where he went to school. And then, 5 years on, took that same scholarship and made it for all universities, for veterans and military spouses. And so now, we have this community of over 800 Tillman Scholars who, are studying law and policy and business and healthcare and the arts and education and all sorts of things. But all of them are, individuals who believe that, the biggest impact they're going to have in their lives hasn't happened yet, regardless of whatever amazing things they've already done. And so, as a foundation, what we do and the way that we see our role is to amplify our scholars' impact. We're organized around 4 values that drove Pat: service, scholarship, humble leadership, and impact. And, for us, we really want to help our scholars get to school, get through school, and open doors that might not have been opened. And then after that, we want to help them, help their impact be a little bit deeper, a little bit broader than it otherwise might have been, through our community and our support and the leadership development that we offer.
I love that. I'm just trying to think of how big the footprint is of 800 scholars going through this program and how much that expands the story that he did such a good job sharing about Pat.
Well, we talk sometimes about a ripple effect, and Pat is kind of the first step of that. Our scholars are just the next step. But you're right. There's like all of our scholars out in the world trying to serve somebody else, trying to make somebody else's lives better. And we hope that ripple effect is just bigger and continues outward.
Yep, love that.
It's amazing how sports and military, they have that synergy, right? And it's the qualities, the leadership especially comes out a lot in the sports. And you think about what the impact that Pat had. I looked at that story about what Jake Plummer did, right? Jake Plummer, he couldn't wear something to show his support, but he grew his hair out, right? And a couple other his teammates grew their hair out in honor of Pat. So it was cool to carry that legacy too. And to think that he was Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year was pretty amazing too back at ASU.
Yep.
But those qualities and those attributes, he probably knew it right when he walked into a room that he had that kind of presence. That's
how people talk about him. They talk about him as somebody who's special and created those kinds of connections that continue to last. I'll share this with you too. We have, a big event in April that we'll talk a little bit more about later, but our race committee, the volunteers that help us to put that on, those are all people who knew Pat or were connected to him 20 years ago. Like one of the guys was his athletic trainer when he was a Sun Devil. One of the guys was in marketing in ASU athletics. One was just, a college friend of his. Like these are all people who continue to show up every year and help this thing go. And it helps to fund our scholarships in a meaningful way. But I hope we can all have that kind of impact on somebody 20 years down the road, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk. We're going to keep going on what you just informed our audience, but we'll go a little bit further with that about the impact that the foundation has had, the number of scholars and universities that you've expanded to our community in 2022. So again, you start small, right? $1 million comes flowing in early on, and you're wondering, what am I going to do? And then it morphs into something that 10 years from now, 20 years from now is going to be something that is going to be just spectacular for a lot of people. But talk about the expansion you've had.
Yeah. So we select 60 Tillman Scholars a year. And, that nowadays, that's about a 3% selection rate. We get about 2,000 applicants for those 60 spots. And, the board, well before me, the board made a decision to serve a smaller number of folks deeply versus serving a lot of folks not so much. And so, what that means for our community is we know everybody in our community. We know all 811. And we're able to kind of figure out what they need and help them open some doors where needed. But, we have 18 university partners. We have across the 160 Tillman Scholars that are currently enrolled in school today, they're at about 120 universities. And so, some universities will have two or three Tillman Scholars at a time. And all of those universities are places that are, that are supporting veterans and military spouses. But we believe that education is a really important inflection point for our veterans, for military spouses, as they are making a transition from one chapter of their lives to the next. And our university partners have been great. We've actually just added one of the schools at American University and Gonzaga University, where I went to school actually as a university partner this last year.
So you're a Bulldog, right? So if the Bulldogs play the Jayhawks, all right, we'll talk about that another time, okay?
Stay focused, Tom.
I know, I got to stay on task
Stay
here.
focused.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dan.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, March is coming right around the corner here.
I know.
Now that my team is no longer in the hunt for the Super Bowl, now
it's March Madness. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we're grateful to have really good university partners who are trying to support veterans on their campuses, and ultimately believe in the potential of our Tillman Scholars. Like that's what this is all about, right? We go through an application process. We look for scholars who are trying to do big things in the world and who we believe can do those big things based on what they've already done. And then the conversation is simply about, great, how do we help them to get there? And those conversations with our university partners, with the corporations who support our work, with the individuals and the foundations who support our work, that kind of conversation is so motivating for me because it's all about, great, how do we help somebody else? And it's good. It's a good place to be. It's rooted in optimism.
And I can hear it in your voice that it's fulfilling work.
Yeah.
So talking a little bit about the people that do apply. So, on your website, pattillmanfoundation.org, we can clearly see there's a place for folks to apply. Can you talk about that process and what they might expect as they go through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for your veterans or military spouses who are listening, go to apply.ptf.org, PTF for Pat Tillman Foundation, apply.ptf.org. And our application is open through the end of February. So we got about a month left. If folks are just hearing about this for the first time, I'd say the first step you ought to take, aside from just filling out your name and all that information, is getting a recommender to write a letter of recommendation for you. So because you want to give somebody else a little bit of lead time there. Outside of that, you submit your military documentation. Your DD-214 is the document, right? And then talk a little bit about what you do in your community and answer 2 essay questions, a couple hundred words each. So it's not a ton, but the successful applications that we see are people who can articulate very clearly, here's the big impact I want to have in the world. Here is why you should believe I can do it based on what I've done. And here's why this education at this time is going to help bridge those two things. It's going to get me from what I've done to what I want to and can do in the future. Those are the most successful applications. And then the last thing I'd say too, for folks looking for recommenders, we're not big on if somebody has a connection to fill in the blank, name that we might have heard as famous as a politician or whatever. I don't care. Oh, and have them write a recommendation, but maybe they don't know you too well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would advise you, hey, don't do that. We're not going to be impressed by the names. Instead, we'd be more impressed by learning who you are and find somebody who can really talk to your character and your drive to serve. Those are the applications that do the best. But apply.ptf.org, and we got days here left to get that in.
Well, it sounds like good advice in terms of the recommendation letters for sure. And it sounds like you would surface very thoughtful candidates, I think, going through that. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of folks too who are in the application process. We have a variety of info sessions that are on our YouTube channel, and we get into the nitty gritty of the details of the application. So definitely would encourage people to go there as well. And then, it's not uncommon for folks to reach out to Tillman Scholars who maybe they don't know. Find a Tillman Scholar on LinkedIn and send them a note and say, hey, I see that you and I have a similar background. Could you maybe look over my essays or something? And, worst you could get is a no. And I don't think any of our scholars are going to say that. So would encourage that.
Sounds like advice I give my kids. Ask the worst that could possibly
and
happen.
They listen to you too.
Well, they don't always.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your partnerships, especially for children of a veteran or service members? You want to go into a little bit more detail for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a variety of partnerships. A lot of our applicants, we've got about an even split between enlisted and commissioned officers coming from the military. And a lot of our folks, sometimes when you're in the military, you don't know what you don't know, right? And especially in that transition, who knows what jobs are out. Think about my path, right? I work in a nonprofit. A lot of people might say do you get paid? Does that mean you get paid? What does nonprofit mean? And it's well, yeah, I still have bills I got to pay. I can't do this for free. Right. And everybody else, in the military, you just don't know what you don't know. And so, we have one organization that we partner with called Service to School. And it's a bunch of veterans who will help with your applications to, you name it, university from, the super high end or, whatever that means, and more selective universities to not selective, but this local state school or whatever. Ultimately, they want to help you put your best foot forward. So Service to School is a good one that actually was started by 2 Tillman Scholars, which is kind of fun. Another partnership we have is with the Warrior Scholar Project. And they do a similar thing. They help veterans who are in the application stage of that transition and help make sure that they're ready for college. And not only in the application process, but after that, all right, well, which school should I go to? And what does it mean to be back in school when maybe that wasn't my top priority when I was in high school, So Warrior Scholar Project is another one. For, you mentioned children of veterans. There's a variety of organizations out there. So our scholarship is for veterans and military spouses. But there are organizations out there, whether it's through AMVETS or Folded Flag Foundation serves children of Gold Star families. There are organizations out there that specifically focus on children of veterans. But again, ours, our Tillman Scholarship is for veterans and military spouses who both have really served in their own way. And sometimes folks will be curious about the inclusion of military spouses, but our belief really is that those spouses have served, though in a different way. They have also served in their own way. More often than not, spouses don't have their own jobs and get moved around to a variety of places around the country or the globe in support of their spouse who is serving. And so we acknowledge that just the same.
Great. Made a lot of notes there.
I know. I'm trying to catch up with all this great information.
I know. We'll have to trade chicken scratch on our paper here. I want to transition just a little bit and talk about something that we see highlighted as part of the foundation and sort of the fiber of it, really, the 6 leadership attributes. I don't know if you can share those with our audience and give them a little insight into that.
Yeah, sure can. So we, this month actually, have launched a project we've been working on for 3 years called the Tillman Leadership Institute. And what this is really is an investment in leadership development in a variety of organizations through our Tillman Scholars. So we are taking the uniformed service leadership and the civilian leadership experience of our Tillman Scholars and bringing it to other organizations, whether it's universities to governmental agencies, nonprofits, or for-profit organizations. We have built a curriculum and a training program around 6 different leadership attributes: creativity, tenacity, caring, inclusivity, decisiveness, and passion. And all of these things are attributes that we saw in Pat's life and are things that we believe are quite core to being a good leader. There's not a shortage of, leadership development programs out there these days. But what I would say is, we exist as an organization to fill a leadership gap in the world. And this term, the leadership gap, that's an academically studied phenomenon. It's not just kind of a made up thing, where they look at, what people believe the leadership skills are needed for the challenges of tomorrow, and then compare that to today's leaders in whatever organization. How do they measure up against those skills? And what has persisted for over 2 decades is the leaders today don't have the skills to solve the challenges we're going to face tomorrow. And we exist to fill that gap. And we happen to believe that veterans and military spouses are uniquely positioned to fill that gap. And so the Tillman Leadership Institute is a vehicle for that. Each of these 6 different attributes are things that we believe we can build on. Some people look at leadership and they say, somebody's just a born leader. Oh, Pat was just a born leader. Look at that guy. And while it's true that somebody can be born with a little more of this or a little less of that, right? I'm 5'9". I'm never going to be in the NBA. Right? I can't even dunk. I can't even touch the rim, I don't think. But,
with a little help, you might be able to. Yeah.
A trampoline or something.
That was the thing that I cared about, and I trained a lot. Maybe I get a little better, right? We happen to believe that leadership is a thing that you could train and you could build on. And, sure, some people might be, gifted in one way or another, but it's a thing that can be built and learned and trained. And so the Tillman Leadership Institute is our effort to put Tillman scholars in the room with people who want to build their own leadership.
I love that. And those listening to you share the 6 different leadership attributes, they're not the buzzword attributes, right?
Yeah.
It didn't strike me as something I've heard before.
Because 10, 20 years ago, inclusiveness probably wouldn't have been part of that, right? And it just didn't hit the top of the list.
Yep.
So I think you're onto something. I always hear that term, born leader. You're right. And I think if someone becomes a leader because of these learned attributes, then people will always think of them as a born leader anyway.
Right.
Because they thought they had them.
Met them after.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a perception, right, about a leader is the one, like the loud guy in the front of the room, right? And, when we look in our scholar community, what I've learned from them is leadership takes many different forms, right? The kind of traditional idea that a leader has to be an extrovert, right? There's a lot of studies out there that hey, introverts are like really good listeners, really good at collaborating, and maybe they don't fit like the movie picture role of what a leader is, but are people who are really great at leading, right? There are gender dynamics at play. There's kind of background and perspective and diversity issues at play as well, right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at our scholar community that is diverse in all the ways, all of them have leadership skills that they've employed in challenging situations and are still building. It's not something that you reach a mark and you're done.
Right.
It's a lifelong thing. So, we also want to come at it from that perspective as well.
This is the fun part of one of the fun parts of these episodes too, is to talk about some programs that you alluded to these earlier in our discussion, but talk a little bit about Pints for Pat. And I know what Jodi's thinking about Pints for Pat.
Let him answer the question.
That's a long time tradition. Oh, it might be a different answer, right?
Could be.
How did it get started and how that legacy lives on today?
Yeah. I mean, thanks for asking about that. This is a fun one. When Pat was a Sun Devil playing for Arizona State University, and when he was a Cardinal playing for the Cardinals, he used to visit this Irish pub in Tempe called Rulabula. And this place, a small place, I've been there. Sadly, it shut down in the last couple of years, but it was run by a guy named Steve Gumas. And Pat, he's a football player, he's well known, he's got long hair, he's, engaging with everybody, liked to have a pint or two. Everybody knew him. And everybody was his friend at Rulabula. And he used to come in. He had his college number engraved on a Guinness pint glass, 42. Oh. And he gave it to Steve, and Steve kept it behind the bar. And so whenever Pat would show up, he'd show up with his playbook to get ready for the next game, start studying the plays, do what he has to do. But his glass would be behind the bar. Steve would fill it up with a Guinness, and he'd sit down there and do what he was doing. Well, he continued doing that while he was with the Cardinals. That glass, when Pat was killed, was still behind the bar. And so Steve, he treasured that glass. First of all, it was pretty meaningful. And I think I'm sure he still has that glass. But a year on after Pat was killed, he said, I want to do something to honor his memory and now to support this foundation that was started in his name. And so he started an event, which basically was, hey, come to Rulabula, have a pint of Guinness, as Pat would have done, and all the proceeds are going to support the foundation. That has grown now over the years, almost 20 years, to events across the country, Pints for Pat, where it's just that. Come and have a Guinness. And actually, Guinness and Guinness's parent company, Diageo, they are a partner of ours and have supported the foundation. And more than that, if you happen to be a fan of Guinness, you know that the glass is special, right? It's shaped a certain way, and the way they pour it is pretty particular. Since Pat was drinking his own Guinness, in 2000, 2001, 2002, 97, 98, whatever, since then, Guinness, they've evolved the glass. And so the glass looks slightly different, and that's part of their trademark. Well, the Pat Tillman Foundation is the only organization that's allowed to continue to manufacture the old style of glass with the Guinness label on it. They've given us permission to do so to honor Pat. And so we do these events around the country. Sometimes organizations will ask us to do them for their veteran employees, for example, sometimes around Memorial Day or Veterans Day. And it's quite simply just remembering a good human and supporting kind of the living legacy that we carry on here at the foundation.
I love that. Walking into Rulabula and instead of saying Norm, they're like, Pat.
That's right. Yeah, cheers. That's right. Yeah.
But Rulabula, that could be anywhere, right?
I know. I wrote it down phonetically because I have no idea how to spell it.
Yeah. A lot of upside to that.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So a couple more, and then we'll be mindful of your time today. But there's so much to talk about. Tell us about Team Tillman and how our audience might be able to get involved.
I mean, Team Tillman is fun. So I shared with y'all earlier that I like running marathons. If anybody wants to run the Chicago Marathon or the New York Marathon, they can do so through Team Tillman. Or like I did, I think in 2015, I ran a small marathon in Pennsylvania that happened to be flat.
Isn't small marathon isn't that more?
There's no such thing.
It's an oxymoron.
I ran once and it was enormous. Yeah, no.
It's like jumbo shrimp, right? You can't say small marathon.
That's funny. Well,
just a small marathon. Yeah.
Team Tillman is a program that we have for folks who want to run a marathon and support our nonprofit. And so, we'll give folks entry into the New York Marathon or Chicago Marathon, two of the biggest in the world. Or if somebody has another marathon that they want to run, they can do so and raise money for the Pat Tillman Foundation while they're doing it. The race that I ran was in 2015 was a flat and fast race. I was trying to go for the good time. Only like 1,000 people ran it at the time, but folks can run it at any marathon. I'll say this too, at Pat's Run, folks who want to be a part of Team Tillman can do so by raising money for the foundation, raising $500. And we've got a bunch of cool swag to offer to folks who want to do that at Pat's Run in April.
Gotcha. So people can do marathons, Chicago, New York, maybe even a small town like you mentioned in Pennsylvania, but Pat's Run's a specific run.
That's right.
Where they can gain entry to by raising the $500.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Pat's Run too, for folks that might not have heard about it. It's, on April 15 this year, 4.2 miles finishing in Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, Arizona.
I like 4.2 miles a lot better than 26.2.
26.2, yeah. I have a bumper sticker that says 4.2, yeah.
When it says 0.2?
You are correct. I think if you're looking for a smart bunch, you don't go to the marathon. You go to the 4.2 mile race.
Yes, I like it.
We have every year about 30,000 people run that race.
Wow.
It's fun. It's a family event. It's a party for some folks afterwards, and all of it supports the continuation of our scholarship program. And so we have a lot of scholars that show up and do it as well. And if anything that I've shared today is interesting to folks, I'd say show up to Pat's Run and meet the people who are continuing Pat's legacy in meaningful ways. Our scholars like to go there, and we ask them to talk about the work that they're doing. We've got scholars who are trying to solve cancer. We have, a scholar that just got elected to be mayor of a town in Virginia. We have a scholar that produced technology that detected COVID in wastewater sewage systems for local cities. We have a scholar who's a Medal of Honor recipient, a scholar who's an astronaut. We have scholars who are, advancing science in really meaningful ways. They're starting businesses kind of across the spectrum, doing really important work. Go to Pat's Run and get to meet them. We love, showing off our scholars and what they're doing.
I'm just picturing his legacy is like literally they're walking around.
I know.
At the event.
Well,
Definitely.
at one of the patch runs, and this was before I worked for the foundation. I was there as a scholar myself. Marie Tillman told us in a kind of private thing with just scholars there. She said, people ask her, what would Pat be doing now if he were alive?
Yeah.
And in so many ways, that's really an unanswerable question, right? You just you don't know. He was killed when he was 27. He'd be almost 47 now. But her answer was he would be doing what all of you are doing. And you all are carrying his story forward in a meaningful way. And I tell you, like as a scholar, that's inspirational, but it also feels like an obligation. It's like, all right, in some small way, my name as a scholar might be attached to Pat's name. And what does that mean for me? It means I gotta do good stuff in the world. I gotta do something that's important and serves others ultimately. And that feels like an obligation, but it's a motivating one.
I'm sure it is.
Well said. It's almost like after you talk to Dan, it's like he's the right person for the right job at the right time.
I think so. You can feel it.
And even the composition of the board that you have on the Pat Tillman Foundation, the amount of leadership and talent, diversity that's on that board, starting from Marie all the way up to Michael Bidwell, right? President of the Cardinals.
Yep. Yeah. Our board is made up of people who care so deeply about this mission, care so deeply about our scholars and about Pat's story, and have been so helpful. And it's a lot of nonprofits don't get to be 20 years old. We'll hit that mark in April 2024, and we're only getting stronger. And that only happens because our board is putting their shoulders into it.
Oh yeah, I think I read a quote, Dan. Somewhere inside, we hear a voice. It leads us in the direction of the person we wish to become, but it's up to us whether or not to follow. And that when I read quotes like that, it's not just words on a paper too. It's about the foundation. It's about leadership. It's about the scholarship programs, all the different events you do to make people better.
Yep. 100%. And we've that quote I think speaks to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because we all feel that, right? It's like that's very relatable. We all want to grow and be good people in the world and do things that feel meaningful. Mm-hmm. We all get to be an active participant in that.
Dan, you mentioned earlier, and I wrote this down, you don't care about people name dropping, right? Or saying a politician or an athlete. You're more impressed getting to know who that scholar applicant is, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I need to talk to you about Operation, is it Thanapa or Thanapa?
Thanapa, yeah, that's right.
Thanapa. What a great story that is, because you did that, right? And I don't want to take away from the Pat Tillman Foundation, but what you did as a human being is something special. And I just wanted our audience to hear that, if you don't mind, just a few seconds, then we'll wrap this up.
Sure. Yeah, in 2015 it was, 2015 or 16, I think 2016, a friend of mine and I went to Bolivia, and we were able. There's a much longer story here, but we were able to recover the missing black boxes from a plane crash, Eastern 980, that crashed on January 1st, 1985. And on that plane were 29 people who were never found. The black boxes were never found. This plane crashed into a mountain at 20,000 feet outside of La Paz, Bolivia, as it was approaching for a landing on New Year's Day. And we came across this story, kind of reading about the Malaysia plane crash that went down some years ago, and this Eastern 980 was listed on a Wikipedia page on a list of black boxes that had never been recovered. And on this list was this little chart, and on the right column was the reason that they were not recovered. And on this list were planes like the planes that flew into the World Trade Center, right? Those were incinerated. The black boxes were never recovered. But then there was this plane, Eastern 980, and the reason was high altitude and inaccessible terrain. I saw that and said, "Oh, come on!
Come on! I ran a marathon.
Right.
That's easy.
I'll run a marathon up the mountain."
What does inaccessible mean? I bet we can figure that out. And,
it's all relative.
Yeah, and sure enough, partially due to, kind of an interesting result of climate change, the glacier that it crashed into has been melting, and so the victims of this crash and the plane parts have all been kind of coming out of the ice over the last 30 years. And so we did find human remains for the first time, and that disproved some of the wilder conspiracy theories that were surrounding this plane crash. And then we did locate on a plane, there are two black boxes, which are actually orange. Black box is just a conceptual thing. But one is a flight data recorder. How fast is it going? What's the altitude? The other is a cockpit voice recorder, just recording the conversation. We found pieces of both of those. We've actually we went up once and got published in Outside Magazine. And then we went up another 2 times actually with documentary filmmakers. So sometime in the future, I think there's going to be a documentary about this thing. And there's more to the story that we'll be able to share through that process.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with our audience. That's inside and behind the scenes. So thank you.
Sure.
And I didn't know that black boxes were orange.
I didn't either. I mean, think about what we learned by having these things.
I know.
Yeah.
It'd be horrible looking for something that was dark and black, right?
I know.
But they should call it the orange box.
I hate to tell you, but they're actually purple. So whatever you found out there,
it's not a black box.
You got to go back.
Yeah.
All right,
we digress.
Let's finish our military minute.
Yes. So Dan, if you'd be so kind to hang with us for just another moment. We have we'll say an endearing little game that we like to play. It's fun for us. Nobody else may like it, but it's called Military Minute. And so last time for our viewers, we had a guest on from FISH, Friends in Service of Heroes. And we asked the question, how many families did FISH surprise with Walmart gift cards in December of 2021? And if you answered on our social media and you answered 29, the good news is you're right.
Right.
Yeah. Did you answer 29?
It was 28.
Oh, well, you don't win.
And they get a $50 gift card.
They do. So watch for the post and you will win both a $50 gift card for yourself and a $50 gift card to a charity of your choice. And so I want to fast forward to this week's question, which of course is about the Pat Tillman Foundation. So you cannot play along, Dan. You can't answer. And the question is, what is TLI? You heard about it today. You heard a lot about it today, actually. Very interesting part of the conversation.
Did we use that acronym at all during this discussion?
Well, it's probably, they can piece it together.
You think?
I have confidence in our
Do you
audience.
think they'll go to the website or anything?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. They might call you.
Okay.
Okay.
Or Dan.
Or they might call Dan. So screen your calls, Dan. That's all I'm going to say. But I would tell you, as you see the podcast drop for this episode, if you know the answer or you think you know the answer, comment to win. And again, if you're right and we pick you, you will win $50 for yourself and $50 for a charity of your choice. And maybe you could give that back to the Tillman Foundation.
If you enjoyed today's episode like we did, go out to afbank.com and subscribe to the show. Also, make sure to rate us. Leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
And thank you very much, Dan, for being here today.
Dan, outstanding job.
It's a pleasure to meet you and learn more about the Tillman Foundation. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Jodi, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your travels.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Copyright 2022 Armed Forces Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. All non-Armed Forces Bank owned apps, websites, company names, and product names are trademarks or registered trademarks of their respective owners. Their mention does not imply any affiliation with or endorsement by Armed Forces Bank of them or their products and services. They are merely used as examples of the many available apps, companies, and websites that offer similar services. Before using any app or website, you should carefully review the terms of use, data collection, and privacy policy. Apps may have an initial cost or in-application purchase features. This information is general in nature and is not intended to be legal, tax, or financial advice. Although Armed Forces Bank believes this information to be accurate, it cannot ensure that it could change. Statements or opinions of individuals referenced herein are their own, not Armed Forces Bank. Consult an appropriate professional concerning your specific situation and respective governing bodies for applicable laws, such as IRS.gov for current tax law. Armed Forces Bank, the Armed Forces Bank logo, and the Militarily Speaking logo are registered trademarks of Armed Forces Bank.